Hi, I'm Paige. Welcome back to my kitchen. You're watching the next episode of Doing It with Paigey. Today we will be making the Orange Blossom Brioche from the cookbook Bread Baking for Beginners by Bonnie Ohara. Now this recipe is very similar to the brioche recipe that we made last week. The only difference is we're actually not adding sugar, we'll be adding honey instead, and we'll be adding a little bit of orange zest to our dough. This recipe also has an optional ingredient called orange blossom water. Now, I had a very difficult time finding this. The book says that you can find it in Middle Eastern grocery stores. I also looked online and it says that you can find that in certain liquor stores. So if you want to add that ingredient, I would recommend looking there. I was feeling a little discouraged that I wasn't able to find the orange blossom water because I really wanted to try that for you guys, but I was able to find a perfect substitute. Now, like I mentioned a minute ago, this recipe does call for honey, specifically wildflower honey, but when I was on the honey aisle trying to find our honey, I ran across orange blossom honey. So I think it's a perfect trade-off. I'll link the brand and the name of the honey in the description below for you guys. If you tuned into our brioche video last week, you know that my bread turned out a little bit underproofed. I'm going to make a few modifications to the recipe today to see if I can yield a different result and hopefully get it perfectly proofed for you guys. I mentioned last week that I think that the dough was underproofed because we added cold ingredients like the milk and the eggs. So what I've done is I actually set my eggs out this morning, probably about 2 hours ago or so they're right around room temperature. I've also let my milk set out for about an hour as well. My goal is to just try to get that milk close enough to what we would normally get our water temperature to if we were baking any other bread recipe from this book. Another little trick that I'm using today is I'm actually going to be using half and half instead of whole milk. I have used this in my brioche recipes in the past and it has turned out so good. If you don't have half and half and you just want to follow the recipe, obviously whole milk will work fine. With all that being said, I'm really excited to get started, so let's go ahead and start preparing and weighing out our ingredients. We'll be adding a little bit of orange zest to our dough today, so if you don't have a zester, you can use a cheese grater. That's what I usually use, and I just use it on the finest setting. In separate bowls, I'll weigh out my all-purpose flour, salt, yeast, and eggs. Now, weighing out your eggs can be kind of tricky. I usually crack some into a bowl on my scale, then I'll whisk them up and pour out any excess into a separate bowl until I can get the correct measurements for my dough. Any leftover egg is saved for my egg wash that we'll use later. In a large bowl, I'll start off by weighing out my very soft room temperature butter. I usually set my butter out on the counter the night before I bake to ensure that it's very soft. I'll then add in my honey, half and half, eggs, orange zest, and then we'll add our yeast on top of this and start whisking this all together. Now don't be alarmed if this is kind of a chunky consistency, just try to get it as smooth as you can. Once this is well mixed, we're going to add our flour on top of this mixture and our salt on top of the flour. And we'll just jump right in and start mixing by hand. If you have an aversion to getting sticky, you can use a rubber spatula or a wooden spoon to mix your ingredients together. However, I prefer to mix by hand because it really allows me to feel the dough and know when the ingredients are well combined. Your goal here is to get your dough very stretchy and all of the dry ingredients incorporated. Now that our ingredients are well mixed, we're gonna let this rest for about 30 minutes so that the flour can absorb some of these wet ingredients. All right, it's been about 30 minutes. It's time to go ahead and start kneading our dough. I'm gonna start by turning our dough out of the bowl onto a floured countertop. I'm gonna sprinkle a little bit of flour on the dough because it is a little bit sticky. And you guys know the drill. To knead, all we do is push forward with the heel of our hand, give our dough a quarter turn, and do the same thing. So push forward, pull back, quarter turn. Forward, back, turn. Now, if your dough starts to get really sticky on the countertop, I always keep my dough scraper nearby, and I'll just release that from the countertop, add a little bit more flour, and continue to knead my dough. Now we're going to do this for about 5 to 10 minutes until our dough has tightened up. All right, you can probably tell from the video, but our dough has really started to tighten up. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pop this back into the bowl and cover it up with a floured kitchen towel. We're gonna let this rise for about an hour and a half to 2 hours, so we will come back and check it then. All right, it's been about 2 hours, and here is what our dough looks like. Now you might notice that enriched breads definitely don't rise as much as the other types of breads in this book, but don't be alarmed. I know this is ready, so I went ahead and sprayed a loaf pan. We're gonna go ahead and get our dough shaped and put it in there. So I'm just gonna turn my dough out of the bowl. We're just gonna do a simple loaf shape. So we're gonna do a couple sets of letter folds, and I'm just gonna take this side and fold it down to meet the middle. And I'll take the side closest to me and do the same thing, just fold that into the center, coming from the left, and same thing from the right. All right, I turned our loaf over seam side down, and I'm just gonna place this into the loaf pan, and we're gonna let this proof for about an hour and a half and come back and see how it looks. All right, so I know I told you that we were gonna come back and check our bread at an hour and a half, but I lied. It's been 3 hours total that we've been proofing, and if you need proof, here's the loaf. Look how much it rose. It's like bubbling over the top like it's supposed to. I'm just so excited about this. So like I said, 3 hours total I proofed it. The book says between an hour and a half and 2 hours. At the 2 hour mark, I put it in the microwave. I used that as the proofing box. I just put my dough in there with a cup of boiling water, and I just let that sit inside of the microwave for an additional hour so that it could really rise, and it worked. Now that our dough is done proofing, we're gonna go ahead and put on our egg wash, and we'll get it ready to put into the oven. Okay, I've got our leftover egg from this morning, and I've just added a couple tablespoons of water to this for our egg wash, and we're just gonna brush the top of our loaf. I've had my oven preheating at 375. We're gonna pop this in the oven and let it cook for about 30 minutes. We'll check on it and see how it looks. Alright guys, so our bread is done. It's been cooling on a wire rack for about 30 minutes. If you made this recipe at home, just be sure to let your loaf cool outside of the loaf pan so that it can properly cool without getting soggy. Overall, I think the loaf turned out so good. I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys a close-up of the bread so you can see how it didn't really crack along the sides like it did last week. As you can see, both sides of the loaf, there aren't any cracks along the side, which indicates that it was proofed properly. This loaf turned out so good. Let's go ahead and slice into it so I can do a taste test. So the bread turned out really good. It has a very subtle orange flavor. I definitely wouldn't say that it's overpowering, which is kind of what I was expecting, especially with adding orange zest, but it is very subtle. One thing I'm noticing with the texture is that it's a lot drier than the brioche that we made last week. I just checked all of my measurements and everything, and I just realized that this recipe has about half as much butter as the last brioche that we did. I think that might be the contributing factor as to why this bread is a little bit more dry. Overall, I think this is a really good loaf, and I think it would be especially good to make in spring or summertime. With all that being said, let's go ahead and give my dog a taste test. I feel really bad for her this week because she has to wear a cone, so hopefully this bread will make her day. This is Duchess. She loves bread and hates this cone. Now be sure to tune in next week because we are making cinnamon rolls, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people out there are going to be very excited about this recipe. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, be sure to subscribe, and thanks again for watching Doin' It with Paigey. I'll see you guys next week.
Hi, I'm Paige. I don't like that. My outfit looks like pajamas. Orange Blossom Honey. Okay, let's get zesty. I'm waiting on you. Oh, I forgot about the orange zest. Did I even rap the first time? Did we even say let's go ahead and get started? I don't even know where we left off. I did say that. Did I skip the orange zest again? I didn't even say it. Is that even necessary information?
Zest.
Should I refilm all of this?
No, great.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Anywho, did I just say put it in the oven 5 times? What should I say? Oh, it smells so orangey.